Casey Worth, thanks so much for joining me today. It's great to see you.
Likewise. Thanks for having me, John.
Yeah, so just to set the stage a little bit here, you're IBM's General Manager of Energy. You serve on the Gridwise Alliance board, which is a big reason why I'm really excited to chat with you about this evolving role of AI in the utility industry. And we were talking a little bit beforehand, before recording, that these buzzwords of AI and digitalization seem to rule the discourse in our space. But looking forward to getting a little bit more specific and in the weeds with you about how this is really impacting the industry, especially because it's such a prominent theme at DISTRIBUTECH International this year that's coming up in just a couple of weeks. I think DTech, this is a nice thing for our industry, is it serves as this like annual checkpoint for us to see where are we at today, where are we going. I'll set it up there very high level for you. Where do you think we are today in this uptake of AI and digitalization? Where is it, manifesting in tangible ways? And where might we be even at the next DTech?
Again, thanks for having me. And big question, a lot I can add there. So I'll try to be somewhat brief. But firstly, if I sort of think about, as we were preparing for DTech last year and comparing that to this year, of course, the AI focus, the AI wave, however we want to refer to it, was sort of just beginning last year at this point. And I don't think that there was really yet a broad recognition within enterprise of this being a tool or a capability that was really going to hit as quickly as it did in Q1 and Q2 last year. Certainly over the course of over the last year, I've had probably over 100 client meetings and interactions with C-suite, especially on this topic, and ideating and discussing strategies, et cetera, et cetera. So the first thing I would reflect on is this major change in terms of now moving from brainstorming and ideation to really starting to look for business impacting or process impacting use cases that there are clients in the sector can move quickly and move from experimentation to understanding where there's really going to be business value and differentiated outcomes leveraging this technology. That's sort of a high level statement. I'll jump into a couple of comments there quickly. But secondly, when I think about the broad topic of digitization, which I agree has been around for quite some time, we've had the 4Ds that we talk about, always having digitization in one of those impacting our sector. I think that AI and as I see utilities moving from starting to understand what it even could do and then actually starting to apply it within their workflows or processes, there are a lot of prerequisites from a data automation, security, governance type things that a lot of utilities, unfortunately, because we have to, quote, keep the lights on as well as deliver services, haven't managed appropriately. And when you try to move with a very advanced technology like AI and generative AI, it kind of exposes some of those precursors that need to be managed. So the digitization journey is a very broad topic. I think that the point we're in right now with the AI explosion is actually driving that digitization behind it quickly, because it's saying, wow, if we don't trust data to go into a model and we don't have good governance, we can't expect to have value from this end state tool if we don't sort of do the homework and the building of the infrastructure and the data layer before it gets in there, as an example. So I'm excited that a lot of the utilities I speak with are now feeling a stronger impetus to go back and start to establish some of these really important IT process and automation benchmarks to allow them to, as they move forward with advanced technologies, be more ready and able to apply them quickly to change processes, which I think is the win here. And if I may add one other comment there, as we think about what I see the move over the last, let's say, 6 to 8 to 10 months of looking at AI, understanding how to use it, and then now where we see clients leveraging it, is really from again, brainstorm, ideate, use case creation to now moving quickly to, before we move forward with these projects, let's really ensure, and not all are doing this, but I see some doing this. I've got examples on both sides. Are we going to really change a process here? Because if we're just applying AI for the sake of doing AI, it's a cool science fiction or it's a cool process, but in the end, we need to be driving value for the business. And if we apply it to a process, but then we realize above stream and downstream of that process, nothing has fundamentally changed, that's not really making a step change in how we actually run the business of utilities. And that is, I think, where we're starting to move towards is, okay, we have a pretty good understanding now of how this may or may not work. We need to establish governance, but now we need to go look at use cases and ensure that we're going to have business value, because those are the places we need to invest time, energy, resources.
Can you drill down a little bit more into those foundational elements that entities, utilities, energy companies, whoever, need to be considering before they take that next step of what's the business application, or how are we going to use this thing to actually help us? And I know IBM's planning on releasing a governance toolkit soon too, so I think this all kind of fits together.
It does, and I think that I remember doing some press. What was it, a year or two ago, and somebody asked the question of what's the one thing you would say to a utility CIO if they want to move quickly, or a CEO move quickly with digitization? I would say data governance. Unfortunately, we have we move quickly. We have silos within utilities across customer, asset, network ops, et cetera, and getting a visibility and trust of the data across these organizations is absolutely required to then be able to leverage that data in models. And if you don't have that as a starting point, then what goes into the model and what comes out of the models, more importantly, is not going to be trustworthy and potentially can have liability or risk. So critically, if I think about one of these key things is data governance at the data layer, then if we talk about the governance and tooling around the application of this technology, it's also critically important. We've worked with a couple of clients who convened the entire senior leadership team of the utility, CEO, COOs, CFOs, and audit team to just talk about, okay, we're starting at zero here, and that's okay, but we want to build a governance framework within the organization that anticipates where we will be going, because we know that that's going to be a major step change in the usage and the broad application of this technology within our organization. We want to build a governance structure as best we can that will get us started and anticipate where we're going, so that when we're there, we don't need to go back, and we have confidence and we know what's happening. We can explain to our auditor, to our constituents, to our board, where we're using the technology, how it's being used, and more importantly, that the outcomes that we're driving, we trust. So governance in terms of the more architectural, technical data governance, which is all about what's the framework for intake of data, application, what's the model for naming, et cetera, the SIM model, if you have a common information model, et cetera. That's the basis, the foundation. Then the process and people piece of it is really building out that organizational layer to understand how we're using it, where it can be valuable, and then more importantly, get moving with that so you can demonstrate value.
Let's talk about that a bit more then. Where
Sure.
are we seeing utilities apply this technology after taking those steps? Hopefully they've taken those steps. What are we seeing today, and look outward a little bit of where we may be in the next 2 to 3 years in terms of actually using these products?
Yeah, and that's actually kind of how we position this with clients. So firstly, I'd say we've had a couple studies that IBM has commissioned of late, and it's very interesting that when you compare the energy and utility sector to other industry sectors, the expectations for the positive impact of AI, especially generative AI, within our sector are actually, according to our studies, higher than all others. In fact, significantly higher. So the interesting thing is that while I think there may be a feeling in the industry that there are other industries moving faster, there is a higher expectation when we get to the application of this technology in our sector of being more impactful and helping improve what we're doing. So I caveat that statement with where we're seeing people get started. I'd say firstly, because of just the standard data security and privacy concerns that we have in a lot of utilities, they're focusing first on public data, where we aren't exposing to a SaaS-based model or other data behind the firewall that may be proprietary or have client data, customer data. And so looking at public sources of data, there's a lot of focus on utility rate case, as well as FERC filings, these sorts of public documents that are very dense and can benefit from the very quick retrieval augmented generation capabilities of a lot of LLMs, where they can go, you can do keyword search or other, but much more advanced than we've had in the past, to help utilities quickly understand what in this document is important for me and then how to respond to it. Even more so we're seeing within the rate case workflow, managing interveners, requests for data or intervener requests, and having to respond to those. It's a really great use case for an LLM because, again, all that documentation is public. It has to be responded to, and you need to respond in the same fashion to the same category of intervener requests during the rate case. So those are two places we see a lot of excitement about the models. There is, I'd say also then in IBM, we've been very open about our application of AI within our HR processes, as well as some of our back office processes. I think HR according to the data we have, is another one of those focus areas within our utility sector clients who are saying, I think there's probably a win for me here, but I want to understand where I should be considering the application of this technology and how I would, again, do that within their data and security framework. So those are two areas that I think right now are very quickly being explored. And then, the code gen, code assist type use cases are certainly of interest to a lot of utilities I speak with. I think though our clients are, we don't build a lot of software in utilities, because we run a lot of very large packages from vendors. And so more at the integration layer and testing layer is where I think people are starting with. And then within the customer space, looking to build new chatbots, obviously integration with IVR and other, customer interaction workflows. So that's sort of the starting point that a lot of utilities I see are looking at. As we look to over the horizon a little bit, if I go to the other end, what we're very excited about, we recently released an open source foundation model with NASA looking at geospatial analytics. And my team and I are very much focused on how do we look sort of very much in the future of creating specific models potentially for this sector that would help with long-term planning, integration of weather, demographic data, et cetera, because I think that that's where there's a huge win in this sort of geospatial capability when utilities are looking at, decades out planning of where do I going to have EV penetration? Where do I need to have long-term storage? Where do I need to think about my interconnects for hydrogen, hydrogen plants, et cetera, which will then have a, upstream or downstream impact on my grid. These are really big questions I know a lot of our clients are looking at as they look at long-term planning that I think we're going to have major impact, positive impact from AI tools.
Everyone seems to be doing AI. At least they say they are, in part because that's the hot thing in the streets right now. But it helps you raise money. It helps tell a story that you're involved in the cutting edge, whatever. What are some, as it relates specifically to energy and utilities, what are some of the red flags that you see just in the discourse and marketing materials, whatever, that isn't there yet? Does anything come to mind regarding things we're talking about or things you hear others saying they can do or will do that we still, have several steps to take before we get there?
Yeah, it's a great question. And certainly not using any names. I think that
you can, if you want to.
We'll see if my team would appreciate that. I think that truth first is a starting point. I think that the topic of governance, as well as model drift, model bias detection, et cetera, there is a huge amount of enthusiasm and really positive thinking about impact. And I certainly don't want to come across as saying, as being overly conservative or negative on it. But our clients in this sector, first and foremost, are concerned about the clean, affordable, safe delivery of the services and products that they deliver to their clients, right? And anything that can potentially impact that is going to be an immediate red flag. And so when we move towards application of AI into production, being able to very quickly and confidently explain what went into the usage of the model and why the model did something is going to be really, really important to them. And the conversations I've had with audit teams and CFOs, as well as COOs, they sort of focus on this. Not that they are stopping the utilization, but again, when I go back to, we need to understand very quickly what's our governance program going to be. And then when we speak with auditors, how can we explain this very effectively? So I think that there are a lot in the industry right now who are very excitedly saying, capability, we can move quickly, and Zach, who I know is going to be doing the keynote for us, is a great positive influence of let's move quickly. At the same time, I think in our sector especially, we need to at least have the empathy that, yes, let's move, but let's also move intentionally, and let's ensure that we're bringing tools with the models that will give us that capability and visibility. Because without it, there could be regret cost on the back end. And again, and it's not saying that should inhibit utilization. We at IBM are very happy, to be putting forward really strong capabilities in this area, and with our governance tooling, et cetera, that you can take that forward, apply these models, and then be able to ensure that visibility, explainability, and drift bias potential detection, so that you can move quickly with these applications. So that I would say is a differentiator. I think the second thing, or something I see in the industry, the second thing is overusing terminology around LLM and Gen AI when there is a mountain of valuable capability with traditional or deterministic AI that will not be going away anytime soon. When we think about some, asset performance management and EAM, there's a lot of AI models in there that are just helping and will not go away anytime soon. You can put an LLM in front of it, fundamentally knowing when you need to go service a substation because you have models that are telling you, hey, we've seen these alerts and this is something that's going to be problematic. There's AI all over what we already do. So it's not that at first, it's not that the industry is behind and we need to sprint forward because LLMs and Gen AI have arrived. We already have it, pretty broadly spread across what we do. Now it's about, again, if you're going to use an LLM, how does the application of that really fundamentally change those upstream and downstream? I'll give you an example quickly. I spoke with a team who were very excited to share with me that they had built out a visual recognition capability to identify rust and cracks on transmission assets and especially insulators. Very excited. I said, wow, that's great. So what have you done within your asset management program now because of this capability you have? And they said, well, actually, we didn't speak to that team about this. We just sort of did the project because we wanted to prove that it would work or not. So it's a great example, but it's like you didn't even speak to the team who would even tell you, does this fundamentally change what I do or not? It's just more data that may or may not be relevant. So it's looking now at, is that a Gen AI use case? Potentially it's using models that are visual recognition, but it's certainly not an LLM. And it's using on the back end actually a lot of sort of traditional deterministic AI, which is still very, very valuable. So it's not that everything needs to have a chatbot, I guess, basically.
That's a great headline right there. Not everything needs a chatbot. Not everything needs an LLM.
Yeah.
You touched on data and privacy really quickly early on in this conversation, but I do think that's a layer that we should talk about a little bit more, especially in light of the FBI director's comments last week about threats to critical infrastructure and really trying to raise awareness among utilities that we need to be thinking about this very purposefully. And I know many of our largest utilities and even the small ones have cybersecurity teams and are thinking about these issues every single day. But how should we be thinking about AI, machine learning, and that intersection with security, data privacy, all of those different things? Is there a tie there that we need to be considering?
I mean, absolutely. And we're working with a couple different regulatory bodies. I won't use all the names here, but where this is certainly a topic of current exploration before regulation. And within IBM, we feel strongly about focusing on, instead of regulating models specifically, we need to think about a broad regulatory framework that says, how does this, like I've been referring to a couple times here, right? This doesn't need to be a side-along focus. This goes within, especially with the utility, their broad security framework that is another potential attack interface, but also another potential, data security and utilization that they need to be concerned about. So I would say that where we're seeing more, the challenges we see when we talk to CISOs or others about this is really more just about, okay, is the model hosted as a SaaS? Is the data going out of it protected or not? And sort of the traditional concerns about that, as opposed to necessarily a model going awry and breaking something, because most of the clients I speak with are not at that point yet where that would even be a risk. But it's more about and that's where I say I don't think it needs to be, look, NERC does an amazing job in North America on focusing on the security frameworks, and they have an incredibly broad, we all know the SIP standards. This fits in that, because it's all about understanding risk, assessing risk, and then establishing a plan to ensure that risk is managed. Now, again, there's a little bit difference here because there are some outcomes that may or may not be able to be A to B to C to explain. That's where the governance and that sort of tooling that can help with that comes in. But from a data security and privacy, it really fits into the standard programs, for my mind, that our utilities focus on every day. It's another check mark of something we need to be concerned about, but they do an incredible job. I mean, look, the grid is very stable. And even though we've had some challenges in the short history with, ransomware and otherwise, broadly, the industry is doing a great job of keeping our infrastructure secure. So I think we'll do a good job with this too.
Casey Worth, thanks so much for the time, and we'll see you at DTech.
Likewise. Thank you, John. Appreciate it.